Imagine you're headed to Florida. You want warmth, sun, anything but the gray clouds and snow. You get in the car and you start driving. You know that movement is progress. You adjust the heater, you worry about the icy roads, you swap out gloves, try different podcasts, anything to make the trip better. It's a long trip. But you never check the GPS. You don't ask the only question that matters. Am I driving south? So the miles roll by, the temperature drops, and the frustration grows. You make changes, but none of them relate to direction. The discomfort keeps getting bigger, it increases, because the behavior keeps contradicting your intentions. It's not a complicated problem, but you're not going to fix it unless you look at a map. You probably think this is an absurd way to travel. You would be right. Yet, if you're anything like most people, you don't take time to regularly check in with yourself to see if your life is aligned with your values, goals, or even your strengths. I'm J.S. Rothrock, a licensed clinician with a PhD in counseling. My work focuses on developing clear therapeutic frameworks that help adults live with purpose, structure, and integrity. Subscribe to the channel and follow me on Facebook, X, or Instagram, where I publish videos and other tools for intentional living and mental wellness. So there are always days when you wake up and you realize there's nothing you're looking forward to. The calendar might be full, the hours are spoken for, but every obligation feels like another chore. You wait for the weekend, as if relief lives there, only to discover that the weekend dissolves into its own kind of emptiness. By Sunday night, you're already hoping for Monday morning, just so the structure of the next week will start to carry you forward again. That cycle of anticipation and disappointment, it feels like a crisis. In fact, it might be. But I think it's something more subtle. A life drifting out of alignment. This drift doesn't announce itself with dramatic, attention-grabbing failures. It accumulates through small, reactive decisions. Those times you choose what puts out the nearest fire, or what quiets the latest discomfort, or fills the next blank minute. When you live this way long enough, you stop noticing whether or not your behavior has anything to do with your intentions. You're simply moving, but you're not directing. Busy, but not oriented. And at some point, you start to feel the subtle friction between the life you say you want and the life you actually live out. This is where Heuristics enters the framework. What I mean is a regular internal practice, one that checks whether your actions are aligned with the values you claim to live by. It's the fifth pillar of Fresh: food, rest, exercise, social connection, and heuristics. The first four shape your body and your environment. The last one shapes your direction. And without it, the other pillars just help you function more efficiently, possibly in the wrong direction. A heuristic practice is simple. It involves a regular micro check, lasting no more than a minute or two. You ask one question with unusual honesty. Is what I'm doing today consistent with what I want for my life? This week, this month, this year, or life in general? You're not evaluating feelings. You're comparing two concrete things, the map and the trail. If they match, keep going. If they don't, acknowledge the mismatch without making excuses. This tiny act prevents the slow slide into a reactive life. Over time, the micro practice gets supplemented by periodic, deeper sessions. These aren't mystical retreats, they're audits. You look at patterns instead of moments. You examine where intentions have remained stable while behavior has gradually eroded. Or sometimes behavior is consistent, but the underlying intention has quietly shifted. This is how you detect drift before it becomes identity level dissonance. When you find a mismatch, there's two possibilities. Either intention was unrealistic or outdated, or your behaviors wandered. Most of the time, it's the behavior. People rarely suffer from a shortage of good intentions, but we suffer from a shortage of deliberate action, especially when it comes to those small, everyday decisions. But the point of the practice isn't to assume blame, it's to choose course correction. You can revise the intention, or you can revise the behavior. Either one is legitimate. What's not legitimate is pretending that the mismatch isn't there, or continuing down a road you don't want while complaining about the journey. This is why heuristics matters. We're expert rationalizers. Humans can explain almost any pattern in hindsight. We can convince ourselves that drift is actually momentum, and that stagnation is stability, and that avoidance is rest. The micro practice interrupts that reflex and forces a moment of clarity in a culture that's built on distraction. It keeps your life from becoming a series of tasks performed without reference to the person you want to be. You don't need to be especially disciplined to do this. Anyone can check whether their behavior aligns with their goals. The practice doesn't create virtue, but it exposes the distance between what you want and what you're doing. And once that's exposed, that distance becomes impossible to ignore. So if your days feel drained of meaning, if you're living for the weekend only to find the weekend is hollow, and you're oscillating between craving structure and resenting it, the problem's not your schedule. It's the absence of internal alignment. You haven't been steering, you've been drifting. Heuristics isn't a cure, it's a compass. And compasses don't fix the terrain, they fix your direction. The question is whether you're willing to look at where you're actually headed, not where you'd like to imagine you're going. Because once you see that gap clearly, the next move isn't mysterious. It's simply the one that brings your behavior back in line with your intentions. People don't live the life that they want by accident. They get there with regularly checking the pulse of the direction that they're going. That's the entire practice. A daily check, inner and outer alignment. A periodic audit of drift. Making a choice to course correct instead of pretending that you have no control over your life direction. If you want more straightforward, evidence-informed frameworks for taking control over your life, hit like and subscribe, and connect with me on social media. I post regularly to sharpen your thinking, strengthen your routines, and keep your behavior aligned with your values.